Welcome to another Meta Monday episode. Per the voting results, I'll be covering Gallantmon X today. This deck has many variations on how you can build the deck, but for this specific build I do want to touch that Gallantmon has so many Digivolutions at this point that the effects themselves can be conflicting. Very briefly before diving into the deck profile, there are currently 3 different Gallantmons in the Digimon trading card game. BT2 Gallantmon is a 4-cost Digivolution body that can delete a Digimon with 6000 DP or less if you have a red Tamer in play. But its when attacking effect can potentially trash a security for every 10 cards in their trash. The Gallantmon starter deck also introduced a second Gallantmon with a 3-cost Digivolution cost, an 11,000 DP stat line, an innate security attack +1, and gets a DP buff if no Digimon was deleted by its when attacking effect. And lastly, EX2 Gallantmon that plays more on the control side of things by adding DP to deletion-based DP effects. Overall, Gallantmon can be played on a more control element, or aggro, and this deck focuses on the aggressive strategy to keep up with the OTK decks of this format. And if you enjoy these types of videos, do consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and hitting that notification bell for more future content. As always, I'll go over the card by card, the strengths, the weaknesses, and the combos. This deck runs 5 level 2s, 12 level 3s, 11 level 4s, 8 level 5s, 7 level 6s, 2 level 7s, 4 option cards, and 6 tamers. For level 2s, this deck runs 1 Demi-Meramon and 4 copies of Digimon. Demi-Meramon is a simple 1000 DP buff when checking in a security. With more X-Antibody and OTK decks running rampant this format, that plus 1000 DP could be the difference between survival and deletion. And Digimon is for draw power. Whether mulligans are present or not, you'll want to draw as much as possible in this deck. I've had several test games where I bricked absolutely terribly, but this only happens after maybe 5 or 6 games. Other substitutions could be maxing out your DP buffs or even swapping the Demi-Meramon for Gurimon. For level 3s, this deck runs strictly Gallantmons, 4 Gallantmon X for the extra draw off of your Gallantmons, and adding another plus 1000 DP to your DP based deletion effects. 4 EX2 Gallantmon for the search power and inheritable Digimon deletion of 3000 DP or less, and 4 starter deck Gallantmon for warp Digivolution capability and more draw power. There's so much searchability and draw power with your bottom end that there aren't any substitutions I recommend. Even BT2 Gallantmon, who gives you plus 1000 DP if your opponent has 5 or more cards in their trash, and promo Gallantmon for extra draw are just unnecessary. For level 4s, this deck runs Growlmons and the surprising 2 Agunimon for endgame finishers. 4 Gallantmon X for additional Digivolve off of Growlmons for 0, and another extra dig, and the additional plus 1000 DP to the maximum DP of DP based deletion effects. 1 EX2 Growlmon for just another Growlmon target, and 4 starter deck Growlmon for the extra memory gain when you delete one of your opponent's Digimon. 2 Agunimon for the hybrid for game. First off, you might be wondering why I'm running the 1 EX2 Growlmon and not just 3 Agunimon. In playtesting, I found that my searches with Gallantmons would typically bottom deck Agunimon frequently. By making it an EX2 Growlmon, I have a potential hit depending on where I am in the Digivolution climb, and this provides another target for Gallantmon X. And while you could run Geogreymon in this category, I don't recommend it for the fact that all of your DP buff based deletion effects don't trigger on your opponent's turn. Meaning you have to play Geogreymon for its on-play cost of 6 in order to get that 4000 DP initial deletion and then any additional buffs to it to apply. For level 5s, this deck runs strictly War Growlmons. 3 War Growlmon X for the extra Digivolve up from vanilla War Growlmon. This Digimon also lets you mark 2 of your opponent's Digimon for extra memory when they get deleted until the end of their turn. Not to mention, War Growlmon X can delete any number of Digimon that total 6000 DP or less when you Digivolve into it, if you have War Growlmon or X-Antibody under it. 1 EX2 War Growlmon for another plus 1000 DP to DP based deletion effects, and 4 starter deck War Growlmon for the extra security check. This variant of the deck that I've been playtesting is very explosive, going for security checks over anything else. Your DP increases for DP based effects is more so to provide extra targets for your Digivolutions, while potentially deleting Digimon at the top end. Overall, I feel that EX2 is more appropriate for the control-oriented Gallantmon deck, while the starter deck emphasizes aggression. But again, BT2 or Growlmon is unnecessary for this build, and unless you're running Geo Greymons, Chimeramon could be slotted in at 1 or 2. Though I don't recommend it because this build felt very clunky and slow. For level 6s, as previously mentioned at the beginning of this video, there are many Gallantmons that have already been printed. But for utilization, EX2 Gallantmon is best for control decks in my opinion, while starter deck Gallantmon is better for aggro. BT2 Gallantmon has its uses as well, but lies more on the mid-range of things, and at this point, I feel like X-Antibody Gallantmon offers a better option. Gallantmon X, when digivolving, deletes the Digimon with the lowest DP. Meaning if your opponent's only Digimon is a level 6, you delete it immediately and you get to trash the top card of their security. In combination with Takato, you can gain a memory and more memory if you have starter deck Growlmons inheritable across other Digimon. But the starter deck Gallantmon can give you pushes for multiple security checks, with its innate +1 check, a potential +1 check from more Growlmon if you delete something, and another from Taikamiya. Personally, in the OTK format of BT9, I feel aggro is the way to go, and in playtesting I've outpaced even Metal Garurumon decks in some test games. But I'll cover more of that in the combos. For level 7s, this deck runs 2 Gallantmon Crimson modes. While you could run Blitz Omnimon as another potential finisher, your searches can potentially bottom deck this card. Instead, with EX2 Guilmon, you'll always be able to add the Crimson mode to your hand. Not to mention if it's in the security, it has a high DP stat line that only loses to a few Digimon. And finally, in conjunction with Takato, this Digimon can still get Blitz even when digivolving into it. For option cards, this deck runs 2 Atomic Megaloblaster and 2 X-Antibody. Atomic Megaloblaster is an amazing option card in BT9 that lets you delete any number of Digimon that totals 10,000 DP. Keep in mind that all of your Digimon's inheritables that boost DP deletion effects only work on your turn. Atomic Megaloblaster might not be able to delete your opponent's level 6 Digimon their turn, but it does affect a select few meta decks like Metal Garurumon X and Imperial Dramon. The only other option cards in this lineup is the X-Antibody option card for digivolving when attacking into a Digimon with X-Antibody, i.e. your main target being Gallantmon X. There's not a whole lot of other discussion here, primarily because the deck is more offensive than defensive. Finally, Tamers in the form of 2 Taikamiya, 1 Hiro Manakawa, and 3 Takato Matsuki. Taikamiya adds additional security checks to your top-end stack of Gallantmon, who can potentially trash the 1 security off the top first. Hiro can provide the DP buffs. My thought process for the Tamer choices was bringing up my security checks to end the game as quickly as possible. Not to mention with Gallantmon on board, it's likely that I keep my opponent's board clear while setting up a Takato for a blitz play next turn, or even a Gunimon for game. Hiro does provide the DP buffs for survivability against my opponent's level 6 Digimon in security, but overall statistically you have a high chance of hitting everything else instead. Strengths and weakness wise, this deck runs a lower than normal rookie count. Because of that, you are definitely more prone to bricking. But like all X-Antibody related decks, you can run Cool Boys, or in Gallantmon's case, Red Memory Boost to find your rookies as well. Calamon was another consideration, but ultimately this deck leans on the high roll end. Strength-wise, you have the capability for multiple security checks, but because you're not relying too much on the EX2 Gallantmon, the option cards you normally have aren't in the deck for that reason. Instead, Atomic Megaloblaster is your primary out to Imperial Dramon and Metal Garurumon X decks that go in for multiple checks. Unless that Were Garurumon is under the effects of a delicate plan, security can be a risk sometimes. As for combos, ideally you want a hand with one of each level for efficient evolution climbing. Tamer-wise, you want to set up a Takato as quickly as possible. In this situation you need a Blitz with Gallantmon for deletion effects. Climbing from Guilmon, you preferably want the non-X-Antibody variant in the bottommost source. This allows the extra Digivolve for digging deeper, and if you're lucky can go into the Growlmon X-Antibody. Assuming you went second, you can pass back turn by going into War Growlmon. If your opponent pushes you to 2 memory, even a War Growlmon X can allow you to gain 1 memory off of the deletion of one of their Digimon, setting you to 3. If starter deck Growlmon is present, then you push yourself to 4. This means that Takato is easily played, and digivolving into the Gallantmon or Gallantmon X can be a blitz and simultaneous deletion. A majority of effects of Gallantmon are to be aggressive and simultaneously delete your opponent's Digimon off the board. While this deck does focus on aggressive checks, you do have low DP thresholds that can be risky against X-Antibody related decks. Luckily, you do have some trash mechanics, but they can also be situational. And of course, option cards can be the biggest threats due to the lack of a delicate plan. What are your thoughts on Gallantmon X for this video? Again, this variant is more on the hyper-aggressive side of things and less on control. Depending on your playstyle, you may want to move towards a more defensive variant, but because the meta is heavily OTK, this variant competes with them in terms of speed. This is Digi-Panda, logging out.